Today is Wednesday, November 16th, 2016, and I'm here with Mike Epting, who has graciously agreed to talk with us about faith in his life. And Mike, I'd like to start by asking you, what brought you to the Lutheran Church, and why do you stay?
Yeah, this church, this specific church, Emanuel, is a perfect fit for me and for my wife. We came here together. Actually, she came first. She was the advanced scout, and she came back and reported that it was going to be a great place for us. And so I joined her right after the Christmas season 3 years ago, I believe. I do have a sort of Lutheran heritage in that my father was raised in the Lutheran Church, and my mother, I think she was actually raised Baptist, but she essentially became Lutheran after they married. But because he was in the Air Force and we moved every few years, he tended to either not be active in the church at all or to go to the Air Force provided non-denominational chapels on in a lot of bases, and we would go to one of those. I do remember going to vacation Bible school as an elementary school kid in one of those non-denominational churches, and memorizing a lot of Bible verses and getting little toys as rewards for doing that. But I would have to say that my parents were not big church goers when I was growing up. As a junior high kid, I was in the far northern part of New York State, and some other kids invited me to go to church with them, and it turned out to be a Presbyterian church. And so for a couple of years when I was living there, I was pretty active at the junior high age in that church. And I think my parents actually came with me a few times. I think the Lutheran church in Watertown, the services were in German. None of us spoke German, so it didn't really work for us. So then in college I met my future wife, and she was hardcore Episcopalian. And at that point I could best be described as a seeker. I had tried a lot of different churches, and I really wanted to be a churchgoer, but I hadn't settled down on one yet. But after we got married, it became the Episcopal Church for the two of us.
I want to come back to this, but I want to interrupt you. What do you mean you wanted to be a churchgoer?
Well,
what was it?
So I was an engineer, an engineering student, and my hobby was electronics. So, that doesn't sound like a very spiritual person, maybe, but I think actually I was. I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, and that naturally turned me into a mental explorer, I guess you'd say. And I had a lot of Catholic friends in college, and I used to quiz those guys unmercifully, trying to figure out what made them tick and whether I ticked the same way or not. And I actually was baptized in a Southern Baptist church while I was in college. So I have experienced that business of, I don't know what you call it, the bolt from the blue, a conversion experience. For me, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it didn't last. It was a very brief moment in time, maybe a few months for me, and it wore off. But anyway, once Rose and I got married, the Episcopal Church was my church for more than 30 years. But when we moved out here to the Central Valley, we found ourselves in the middle of a political turmoil, and the church in Oakdale where we live broke away from the Episcopal Church with the whole diocese and became part of a completely different organization that was for all the things that were against and against all the things that were for. And so we felt we had to move on once they broke away, that we just couldn't be part of that anymore. So we searched for the closest thing to an Episcopal church in Oakdale, and that turned out to be Methodist. The Methodist Church was founded by John Wesley, who was an Episcopal priest. Even when he died, was still an Episcopal priest. So they have roots there, but they don't have our liturgy structure. And Rose was just never comfortable there. And to be honest, although I was okay with the church itself and got very involved and did a lot of things there, I never really clicked very well with most of my peers there. We were just different sorts of people. Mm-hmm. So one year during Advent, we started singing Christmas carols, and that broke Rose's spirit to the point she said, "I can't go here anymore." That was the straw, the final straw.
So when you went looking, were you looking for a Lutheran church, or were you just looking for a church that fit? Or you were looking for something that had a liturgy, a structure?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Now, by that time, my parents they were deeply involved in the Lutheran Church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the ELCA Church in their hometown. So when Rose said this ELCA church fit, I said, well, my dad's going to be pleased, because that's going to... And we'd been there when we visited, and so I knew that their liturgy was very similar to what we were used to, that we'd be comfortable with that part of it. And, when we got here, I immediately found people that I felt comfortable with, which is important too. I don't know if it should be or not, but for me it was really nice to find that there were people here that I could talk to and be comfortable with.
Well, I want to ask you, you're very active in this church, and I suspect it really is just you. That's just the kind of person you are, that you're active in whatever you're involved with. But what do you see as the strength of the Lutheran Church?
Well, the openness, the willingness to accept people of different minds, different opinions. Even politically, this church is probably 50-50 conservative and liberal, and I think that's great.
The parishioners?
That's a strength, yeah. This particular congregation, I think, is. Probably at a national level, the church is pretty liberal, the ELCA, compared to other Lutheran churches. But I think that openness is the main strength of this denomination and of this parish. Now you say, my God, I'm busy. Well, one thing when Rose told me about this church, she said, "Oh, by the way, they have a great website, so you won't have to do the website here," because the last two churches, not counting the one in Oakdale, I had been the webmaster for and started from scratch at both of them. Created one from
and lo and behold, you're doing it.
Yeah, and so like the second week I was here, Mike Clark announced that he wasn't going to maintain the website anymore, and I said, well, I guess I can do that again, And I didn't know Paula Barton very well, but when I told her that I was willing to do that, she gave me a big hug. Okay, Paula. I appreciate that. But just going on, for me, going to church on Sunday is a small part of the whole church experience. And if that's all you do, you're missing out on a lot. So it is important for me personally to do a lot of things, to be involved, contribute what I can of time and talent and money.
We are very active, and we're almost out of time here, but I want to ask you, you are very active. Is it just who you are, or do you feel you have a sense of responsibility to the organization?
Well, so the things that I'm able to do, I feel like need to be done by somebody. And I'd be quite willing for somebody else to step up, but until then, no, I do have a responsibility. I feel like I need to keep the website up. I feel like I need to make sure the newsletter is useful and interesting to people.
Well, and you are a very talented person, and the Bible tells us, to those who much is given, much will be expected. And I think that's sort of an example of people doing things
but like
in church.
all things that are gifts that you give, that is, you get more than you give every time. I mean, that's my experience in life anyway. I mean, I love giving people things because I always feel like I'm the one that's the winner in the deal.
And it makes you recognize how fortunate you are when you're able to give.
Absolutely. And I want to take no credit for any of that either. I mean, that's a gift also, a gift coming to me. If I'm able to do those things, that's just lucky. Lucky for me.
Thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate you sharing with us. There's so many things that we could cover, but another time.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.